we've been like, the health food world's been a bit of an experiment, and it's very puritanical, and it loves to define itself by the things it doesn't partake in. Okay? The health food community today, particularly the 100, I say this having healed my body tremendously on 100% raw food diet thing. I did some of that. I think it's the supreme way to cleanse your body. I don't really see it as a diet. Well, the die part, but the diet part, I don't. Just because there's not enough food and people can't live like that for very long, though they can do it for, sometimes people will be like, I've been doing it 10 years, and they're looking all not too good. But you can do it for a while, and it's very healthy. But the people today who really love that 100% raw food thing, and they're out there like doing that and trying to convince you that you should be doing it too, those are the people who would have been the people behind the Prohibition. Those are the people who are the Puritans. It's like telling us what not, why we shouldn't, how it's more spiritual, or it's more godly, or it's more new agey, or whatever, to give up all that other stuff. One of the big ones is ethanol. What's ethanol?
Alcohol.
Ooh, so there's a chord. Hopefully, well, it can be. What is it?
Alcohol.
Alcohol. Fascinating story when you look into wild human beings is that they all consume ethanol. That they all have fermentation technology. That they don't like eating sugar. They like fermenting sugar. When they find sugar, they ferment it, and I say when they find it because they didn't have apple trees here, did they? They were still in Kazakhstan. Right? Apple's not native to this continent. The native peoples here, they like to ferment their ethanol. In fact, we find that everywhere around the world, except in the extreme climates where they couldn't get any sugars to ferment. Places like where the Inuit lived. Right? Up there, not a lot of things you can ferment, so they didn't have it. But the rest of the indigenous world makes ethanol. They make alcohol. And get this. When the domesticator comes to those people and finds those wild people, well, first they freak out and get really upset because the people aren't wearing clothes and they kind of do what they want, and that's freaky. And they go to the bathroom inside of, they don't have a chair for that. So clearly they're savages and must be tamed. And what's the first thing you take away from them? Anyone know?
Food. Alcohol.
Second, their ethanol. You take away their indigenous brew, which, by the way, in indigenous wild human culture is the centerpiece of the whole diet. The indigenous brew. And the place where they particularly get their B vitamins from, they get their amino acids from, they get a lot of the cultures that colonate the bacteria in their bodies, and they keep themselves healthy. And when you take ethanol away from an indigenous people, they get sick. Make no mistake. This whole story, who's heard you live longer if you have moderate amounts of ethanol in your diet? Most people have probably heard that, but no one wants to see, oh, I love it! Look at how everyone's like, oh, I don't know if I can agree to that.
What does the alcohol and like the calcium in the body relationship?
Later.
I mean, is there a difference between like
Vodka
vodka and
there's a huge difference. Okay, awesome, right, because everybody's like, I don't really know, this guy's talking about booze. Check this out. And tomorrow, if you come to the Fix tomorrow, I'm going to be talking a lot more about this. Vodka is 300 years old. Distilled spirits are 300 years old. I'm not talking about Budweiser. I'm not even talking about what we call today wine. I'm talking about indigenous brews. They didn't brew this stuff for 6 months and then put it down in oak barrels in their basement. This stuff brew in 3 days and they drink it all. The yeast, the bacteria, all of the sediment. This is the way. Do you know that animals do this? You know human beings aren't the only ones who like durian. Why do monkeys like durian? Because it turns into alcohol, and they drink that. Lots of animals seek out ethanol in nature. It's just an interesting bit because, see, the apple was not food. Was not even considered a food. Johnny Appleseed planted apples for alcohol, for ethanol. Now, when the Prohibition came, the apple became the symbol of evil. Hence the apple with Adam and Eve. Because it doesn't in the Bible, it doesn't say apple, does it? It's not like, oh, the apple from Kazakhstan. It says a forbidden fruit. Well, they made it the apple, and the apple became the symbol. Kind of like cannabis here in this country the last few generations. They rebranded the apple, and they rebred the apple. And they bred it to have more sugar and more shelf life. Why? So people would eat it. Because the apple farmers didn't want to go out, right? So they start breeding new apple. Apple's hard to breed, by the way. You don't breed it from seed. Breed it from what?
Cuttings.
Cuttings. Which is why Johnny Appleseed was a total rebel. He actually planted apple seeds. They bred it to be sweet and sugary. And now we eat it, and they came out with a new marketing slogan. What was it? You guys all said it a minute ago. Apple a day. Apple a day keeps the doctor away was a marketing strategy for the apple industry to start selling people something that was never considered a food before. Does that make sense for everybody? I start looking at fruits, and I start finding out that many of these fruits don't come from nature anywhere. Who's opened a pineapple and found the seeds in there and planted it? And who's cut open a banana, found the seeds, you go out and plant it?
Pineapples are easy to plant, though. You just throw, the scraps and then they start.
You throw that top in.
Yeah.
But where did the pineapple come from? A berry. That make sense to everybody? The pineapple didn't start off that, did it? And it wouldn't, you know why? Because if you put that much sugar anywhere in nature, what happens? Something comes and eats it, right? So when we were all growing up and commercial farming was very popular, everything was being sprayed with pesticides and fungicides and herbicides and larvicides and all kinds of different sides. My friend David Wolf always goes, suicide. It took me a long time to figure out why they would do that, but here's why. When you plant a hybrid, when you plant a sugar bomb in the ground, all of nature conspires to remove that organism from the life cycle. The apple is not from the life cycle, not the current manifestation of it. So it requires very strange and special strategies in order to keep it alive. That make sense? Has anyone known an apple farmer who switched to organic after being a commercial farmer? It's not easy, is it? Organic apple farming is incredibly hard because you have this sugar sitting around. See, natural plants hide their sugar in complex carbohydrate. You have sugar around, you have bugs come because their job is to remove the stuff. You have funguses and molds come. When people eat that, what happens in our bodies? Same thing, it's bugs, funguses, molds. Those foods don't come from nature, and in nature, those things have a different flavor. Who eats vegetables in the room? Who's ever harvested wild vegetables? Who's ever harvested a wild cabbage?
The wild lettuce you were speaking about.
Who's ever harvested a wild cabbage? Seriously. Who's ever been outside on a trail and seen a wild cabbage?
Skunk cabbage.
Skunk cabbage is like, exactly. Which is that a cabbage? No, not a cabbage. Same name. Who's ever seen the wild Brussels sprout? Who's ever seen the wild celery? Who's ever seen... Man, it's like, it starts getting there. It's like the wild eggplant. Who's seen the wild eggplant? Who's seen the wild carrot? What's it called? Who knows the name of the wild carrot?
Oh, Queen Anne's lace.
Queen Anne's lace. Where I live, and I'm sure here, we have a plant called Queen Anne's lace. That's the forerunner of the carrot. And you pull that out of the ground, right? It's a tall plant. You pull that out of the ground, and it's got a root about the size of my pinky and almost the color of my pinky. Smells like a carrot. Eating it is a very different experience. It's really fibrous, chewy, not a lot of food there. In fact, you'd need to get the amount of nutrition that's in one carrot, you'd probably need 40 of these things. They're really small, they're really fibrous. Now, if you breed that generation after generation after generation, you could turn it into the sugary, large, oversized, bright-colored carrot. Does that make sense for everybody? But in nature, it does not appear that way. This tells us, of course, that our carrot's not really a natural food. Does that mean carrots are bad, you shouldn't eat them? No, but it's like not a natural food. Does anyone know one of the uses? What's the herbal use of Queen Anne's lace?
Birth control.
Birth control. So the carrot actually, in nature, the way it's used, and the way it's been used traditionally and indigenously by our people and the traditional cultures a lot of us come from, and by the indigenous people, is you eat that after having sex if you think there might be an implantation and you want to stop that from happening. Wild carrots, it's an anti-implantation or morning after herb. But the current incarnation of the carrot is different. In fact, it's lost its medicine. Who's harvested the wild lettuce before? And that grows here, and I've been seeing those around. Who's ever eaten one? Put your hand up if you've eaten one. What's the dominant flavor in the wild lettuce? What's the dominant flavor in red leaf lettuce? So it's got a little bitter. Everyone eaten lettuce before?
Yes.
You got a little bit of bitterness. If you've tasted bitterness in a red leaf lettuce or a green leaf lettuce, say yes.
Yeah.
Okay, then, so say we've got that, right? That's kind of like, if you've eaten wild lettuce, it's kind of like the German Shepherd. It's kind of like, it's still got some bitter in it, like the wild lettuce does. Who's had romaine lettuce? Way less bitter, right? Who's had the see-through lettuce? Iceberg. That's like what's like a crystal ball. No bitterness. No bitterness.
No flavor.
No flavor. And also no nutrition. The wild lettuce comes, the iceberg lettuce comes out of the wild lettuce. The wild lettuce grows around here. But what's its traditional use? It's a narcotic.